Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Autumn and today I'm going to be going over all the books I read in June. Okay, so to start off, I ended up reading 6 books in June, which is pretty average for me, and I actually did find a 5-star last month, so that's pretty exciting. The first book I finished in June was And Now Back to You by B.K. Borison. This is the second book in the Heartstrings series, and in this book we are following Jackson and Delilah, who are competing meteorologists. Jackson works for the same radio station that Aiden does, who is the main character in the first book, so we kind of know of Jackson before if you've read the first book. And Delilah is a meteorologist for a news channel, but she is not only a meteorologist, she kind of has to cover a bunch of random stories as well because her boss kind of exploits her super bubbly, easygoing personality. And we are pretty much following Jackson and Delilah as they have to team up to cover this massive winter blizzard that is taking place in the East Coast. There's definitely like a forced proximity trope, a one-bed scenario trope, and grumpy versus sunshine trope as well. So this book had a lot of those romance cliches, and I felt like this book was just a little bit too cheesy, a little bit too corny for me. I ended up giving this 2 stars. I just could not get into this book, which is so unfortunate because I really enjoyed First Time Caller. So I was really excited to read this book and it just didn't hit for me. I think it might have been a mistake listening to the audiobook. I'm not sure physically reading it would have been better, but I just felt like Jackson was a little bit too grumpy sometimes, and I did like his background story and how he's like kind of raising his sisters and stuff. I thought he was a really sweet guy, but he kind of came off a little bit more grumpy than I felt was warranted at the time. And Delilah, she's definitely your sunshine girl. She's likable. However, as the book progresses and her and Jackson get closer, Jackson would start telling her how much he cared for her and how much he liked her and wanted a relationship with her, and Delilah would listen to that, but then it would just kind of go out of her brain because then she would just make assumptions that he didn't actually like her that much and he was just using her, and so she would kind of portray that against him. So that felt very frustrating because it wasn't even a miscommunication trope. It was just her assuming one thing when Jackson was literally telling her the opposite. That felt very frustrating to read, and so I just felt like this book wasn't very cohesive and it felt a little bit sloppy, the writing. So yeah, I gave this book 2 stars. If you absolutely love B.K. Borison and you've loved the first book, I would maybe recommend it, and I definitely would not recommend reading it in June. It's definitely a winter book. The next book I read was The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. I have an entire video reading this book, so if you want to know my in-depth thoughts on it, please watch that video. I gave this book 4 stars and I'm still kind of iffy on that review a month later. So we're basically following 13-year-old Theodore Decker, who survives a mass terrorist attack in this New York City art museum, and he escapes with one of the most famous paintings, The Goldfinch, and we are basically following him as he recovers from this attack and how he kind of survives and copes with the loss of his mom and how his life changes because of this attack, and how this painting that he's hung on to has changed his life forever. I think the premise of this book is super, super interesting. I was very excited to read this book, but it's so long, and I think Donna Tartt's writing style just isn't for everyone. So if you need a book that's fast-paced, that keeps you reading and keeps you on the edge of your seat, don't read this. You won't like it. However, if you're more intermediate, advanced fiction reader and you just want to follow someone's story and you don't care how boring it can be at times or how overly descriptive it can be, this might be a book for you. So just go into it knowing that, because it's really long, and if you're gonna put the time in to read it, I think it should just be a book that you're certain you're interested in reading. The next book I read was The Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon by Beth Brower. This book has been talked about so much on the internet recently. I feel like I've heard a ton about this book, and so I decided to listen to the audiobook, and I really enjoyed it. I feel like I get where the hype is coming from reading this series. We are pretty much just following Emma M. Lyon, and we're reading through her journal, and that's how we get to know her and her life in the 1800s. It is just a slice of life little novella. She is living in London. She ends up coming back to her home, and she finds out that her cousin that was living in her home has kind of used up all of her inheritance that her parents had left her. And so she is dealing with that amongst other things. And she is a very likable main character. She's super ferocious, and she will do whatever it takes to kind of right the wrongs that have happened to her. She's got a really good sense of humor. And so I really enjoyed listening to this as an audiobook. I would definitely recommend. And I gave this book 3 stars. Like, I thought it was fantastic. It was short though, so I felt like I couldn't give it a higher rating than that. However, I might give the other books a higher rating when I read them. The only thing I will say for this is we are technically reading Emma M. Lyon's journal. However, we get a lot of dialogue between her and other characters, and a lot of it doesn't seem conducive with a journal entry. So I was having a really hard time connecting her technically writing these thoughts down, because that's how the book is supposed to be. It's just supposed to be a journal, but the prose kind of reads just like a first-person novel. Feels like it couldn't be a journal entry because of how specific and detailed the dialogue is between her and other characters. Yeah, I just don't think that the overall description of the book about it being a journal entry and the actual prose coincides 100%. So if you find that as well, I'd be interested to know, but overall, it's still good. I'm still gonna listen to the rest of the series because I do like her as a main character, and I think it's just super fun to listen to or read, and they're really short and sweet. The next book I read was The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. I loved this book. I feel like I read this at the perfect time. I read this mostly at the beach, which was super fun. And in this book, we are following Anna, who is a struggling artist post-college, and Liam, who is the son of a billionaire. And so we are following them as they got married in college to afford family housing, because at the time, Liam kind of got cut off from his family and he needed to save some money because of that. And then Anna definitely needed to save money because it's just her and her dad. That's how they met in college. They were just married for convenience, and then they divorced. And this is a couple years later. Liam has shown up at Anna's house asking her to pretend that they're still married for his sister's wedding to basically receive this inheritance. And so Anna agrees because she really needs the money. She is struggling as an artist. She just got fired from her job. She has to provide money for her dad's chemotherapy bills. And so her and Liam end up flying to this private island in Indonesia for his sister's wedding and fake their marriage. I really enjoyed this book. I feel like their chemistry was perfect. I loved Anna's personality. She's just so lighthearted and easygoing despite all the hardships she's gone through, and she is so funny. There were so many times when I read this book where I was just laughing out loud because of how funny Anna is. And Liam also became really likable. The more he spent time with Anna, he realized that he can open up and just be himself. He doesn't have to be serious all the time. And I loved watching them grow closer together. I felt like there was a lot of drama in this book, which was super fun to read. And the overall setting on this private island was so much fun to read. I felt so transported, and I just really wanted to be where they were. So this is a perfect beach read, and I would highly, highly recommend. I gave this book 4 stars. The next book I read in June was The Only One Left by Riley Sager. In this book, we are following Kit, who is a healthcare aide who takes a contract to go take care of this elderly lady known as Lenora Hope. And Lenora's backstory is quite ominous. Lenora is kind of known for most likely murdering her entire family when she was 17 years old. So pretty much what happened was, at the age of 17, Lenora was the only survivor of the Hope family. One night they found her parents and her sister murdered, and all the evidence was kind of leaning towards Lenora because she was the only one left alive. However, they could never charge her with murder. So she has just lived in this house kind of by herself all these years. And everyone still thinks she's the one who killed all her family members, but there's no actual evidence to prove it. So she never got arrested or went to jail. And so Kit has the unfortunate job of taking care of Lenora in her old age, and Lenora cannot speak. She's mute, and so she communicates with Kit through a typewriter, and one night she types to Kit that she wants to tell her everything. And so this book was quite chilling. We are following the clues as Lenora slowly reveals bits and pieces of that one terrible night to Kit and how the night actually went down. I really enjoyed this book. I felt like the pacing was a little bit slow, but it still kept me reading. It was a good length of the book, and I did enjoy a lot of the side characters as well. I definitely had my thoughts and theories, and I'm not very good at guessing what's gonna happen in a book regarding a plot twist, but I did guess this plot twist or part of it. So that was a little bit disappointing because I felt like the plot twist, while really believable and shocking, it didn't get me as much as I wanted it to because I kind of put together part of it. I definitely didn't love this one as much as I thought I would. However, I would still recommend it as a thriller, and I would recommend reading this in October because that's when the setting takes place, and I gave this book 3.5 stars. Okay, and the last book I read in June was Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. I listened to this as an audiobook. My friend recommended me listening to this, so I was like, sure, why not? And I'm not the biggest sci-fi person, so I was like, oh, it'll probably be okay. I gave this book 5 stars. I love this book so much. I am so late to the game reading this. I know it's been out for years and there's a movie on it, but I just finished it in June, and oh my goodness, this book is so good. I feel like it was just the perfect thing to listen to. The audiobook narrator is Will Wheaton, and I'm a big fan of Big Bang Theory, so that was super awesome. I think just knowing that he was the one narrating it just made me want to listen to the book even more and made the experience that much more exciting and immersive because I knew exactly who the narrator was. So I would absolutely recommend listening to this if you don't like physically reading books. In this book, this entire world is set in 2045, where the world has pretty much gone to garbage and people live their lives through virtual reality in this online gaming system called the Oasis. So most people, from the time they wake up to the time they go to bed, they put their VR sets on and they get transported to this world called the Oasis, and they conduct their business, they go to school there, all their relationships are there, and that's how they live their life. And so in this world, we're following Wade, who is a young guy who is very very into the Oasis. He goes to school there and he has his friends there, and he pretty much spends all his waking hours in virtual reality. And so one day, one of the founders of the Oasis passes away and makes a big announcement that his entire fortune and inheritance will be given to the player who finds his egg. So this egg is hidden in the Oasis, and anyone can find it using these hints and clues to get closer and closer to this egg, and Wade is all for it. And so we are following him as he is trying to solve the first hint and solve these clues to get closer and closer to finding the egg. And this book was just so immersive. I really felt transported when I read this book. I felt like I could see the Oasis and see exactly what the author wanted me to see. I felt like the writing was just so fast paced, and it was so interesting and immersive, and I wanted to just binge listen to this book. Every chapter kind of left with a little bit of a cliffhanger, so you just kind of want to keep going. And as more people get closer to finding the egg, the stakes raise, and there's a big battle scene, which was so fun to read about. I just felt like the amount of action packed into this book was perfect. It just kept me wanting more. I love the throwback to a lot of the 80s references that they had. That was super fun. And I think a lot of people that grew up in the 80s and have that real life experience would really love this book, because there's just so many references to it that I feel like it would just be super nostalgic for a lot of that generation to read and reflect back on. And I just absolutely love this book. I gave it 5 stars. I felt like the ending was so good, and I'm definitely going to be picking up the second book very, very soon. And I did, as a side note, I did watch the movie right after finishing this book, and I felt like the movie was so bad compared to the book. It was just so awful, and the movie is not even close to being similar to the book. Everything was different. So if you have seen the movie and if you like this movie, the book is going to be that much better. And if you didn't like the movie, don't worry, because the book is not even close to being the same as the movie. So just take that piece of advice and go ahead and read this book, because it will not disappoint. Those are all the books I read in June. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one soon. Bye.